Welcome to episode 22 of CyberBytes, the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, co-founder of Aspiron Search. Today's guest, we have Thomas Pace, CEO and co-founder at Netrise. Tom's passion for cybersecurity oozes out in this episode. Having identified a better way to do some of the manual tasks whilst he worked at Cylance, he decided to found Netrise, and he hasn't looked back since. How are you, brother?
Doing great, sir. Good to see you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Looking well, mate. Looking well. Where are you at the moment? Is that the home office?
This is the Netrise corporate headquarters, brother.
I love it.
Yeah, it's massive, as you can tell. But yeah, we're in incredibly hot Austin, Texas right now. Everybody's complaining about the heat. I'm not complaining about the heat because I am in my house 18 hours a day, so I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
But rumor has it it's hot outside.
Well, mate, imagine being in the UK. We're complaining about it getting to like 20 degrees. So it's incredible.
Guys, with your air conditioning is crazy.
Yeah, exactly. But no, great. Thanks for coming on, Tom. I'm really excited about this one. There's a few topics that we've sort of got ready to talk about, but with all my guests, what we do is go back to where it all began and how first you got into security to all the way of landing or setting up Netrise. Where did it all start, brother?
Well, I started off as a computer science major in 2003. And I was a computer science and criminology major because cybersecurity programs didn't exist back then. So that was the closest thing I could kind of put together at the time. But I dropped out after a year and enlisted in the Marine Corps. And joined the infantry, which had nothing to do with cybersecurity whatsoever. So I took a little deviation of my life path there for around 4 years. Got 2 paid vacations to the Middle East, which was very nice. All you could eat, all you could drink. So got done with that and then went back to school, worked at a bank for a while doing security engineering and incident response. Then I worked at Department of Energy doing industrial control system security, which is where like the initial inspiration came from for what we're doing here at Netrise now. And then I left there and went to go work for Cylance, that's where I took the problem that I identified at DOE, and that really got amplified while I was at Cylance. We were basically doing what we're doing now at Netrise in a totally manual way at Cylance from a consulting perspective. So, here's a firmware image, here's a car, here's a medical device, here's a whatever. Tell me about all of the various vulnerabilities and risks associated with this thing and how we can remediate them to, create the most secure product possible. So that's kind of the very high level path how we got here. Happy to drill into any of those in more detail as you.
So you naturally when you was in the military, first of all, so that was a non-cyber role, did you say? How did it go into security engineering? So you sort of just casually sort of shifted. How did that happen? Was you interested in computers from the day, or?
I'm one of those kind of lucky people. I always pretty much knew what I wanted to do. I was just always super interested in cybersecurity stuff.
Yeah.
I liked the idea of knowing things that everyone else couldn't know. And I liked the idea of, hey, here are these like rules and barriers that everyone has to follow unless you know how to not follow them. That was just attractive to me. And so the Marine Corps thing was just, I kind of always wanted to join the military, and I probably would have if I just stayed in college the first time and then just probably got commissioned as an officer or something. But the wars were just kicking off, and I didn't want to be, everyone always takes this the wrong way kind of, but I didn't want to be one of those people 40 years later who was like, oh, I didn't join the wars because I was in college. And it's college is always going to be there. College isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer. What's his name? Bill Perkins, I think. who's like a really famous hedge fund guy. He just wrote a book that's amazing. And I subscribe to this thing in life, which is do the things that you can only do now, right? Like if you want to be a competitive go-kart racer, like I'm probably past that part in my life at this point. You know what I mean? If I want to be like an ultra marathon runner, like I could probably still do it, but probably not. Probably wouldn't be great at it. So, to me, it was like, I can always go back to college, but I can't always, it's probably gonna be harder for me to enlist in the Marine Corps as an infantryman 5 years from now, so I did it then before like life got in the way. So, and I always knew I was only going to do it for 4 years. So that's what I did.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, sick. So you went into a few security different roles, and then you identified a problem, which is the first thing you need to do when starting a startup. How did then Netrise come about being formed? Because I know you did start or co-founded with somebody else. Did you know them at your previous place as well? Or?
Yeah. So I met Mike at Cylance. By pure coincidence, he's also a former Marine.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So he was in Cyber Command. And so his Marine Corps experience was directly related to cybersecurity, whereas mine was not. So we are an absolutely perfect team. I mean, we are just two totally opposite humans. And that cannot be a bigger compliment to both of us. Like 100%. I can't do his job and he can't do mine. And it's awesome. It's just, I wouldn't have it any other way. I think we did a really good job of having very complementary co-founders. And so, him and I just kind of hit it off, and he's significantly smarter than me. So it was really just a matter of identifying a problem space that we thought we would be able to execute something on, relatively quickly. I mean, these things, you can't take 10 years to build a solution, right? So when you say relatively quickly, you're talking about, 6 to 12 months, have something. And we did. So yeah, that was, having a great co-founder, I think, is really important. Some people can do it by themselves, but man, it's a lot harder. Yeah, he's an absolute stud. So really excited.
Yeah, love that. I completely agree about finding someone that you complement well with, and probably being completely opposite is the best way. Me and Ollie are exactly the same.
At least for your first one, right? So like maybe I go start another company, right? And I don't know, or maybe Mike does, and Mike's like, hey, I'm going to do this one by myself. Like I can get to this point on my own, and maybe he has to hire a CEO at some point. But he gets to maintain a lot more equity. Like there's,
different components.
Yeah, you can kind of do it a number of different ways. But here's hoping this is our first and last.
Well, look, it looks like you're having a lot of fun at the moment. I saw you had a recent seed raise, I think another 8 million. You've obviously hired aggressively recently when the market, as you well know, you're probably one of the people I see that's just hired like 10 folks in 1 month, and everyone else is laying off. So
yeah, you want to talk about, people ask me why I have a hard time sleeping. You just laid it out perfectly. So we had a board meeting last week, and went great. Everyone's happy, hitting numbers, adding new logos. ARR is going up and to the right, which is, I know lots of companies where it's not going anywhere, or it's going down because they're churning customers. So just those statements alone are very net positives. But I had a slide that literally said exactly what you just laid out. Like I have a slide that says what keeps me up at night. And what keeps me up at night is the fact that companies in very attractive markets with very strong executive teams and very strong backers from a venture capital perspective are doing layoffs. And here I am. Hiring 8 people in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And you have to execute when it's your time to execute, right? And so we are seeing traction. We're seeing customers, we're seeing a need for what we're doing. And you just have to imagine, like, this thing has to turn around, right? I mean, if it doesn't, we're all just out of luck. So, you know what I mean? So what do we really do by not hiring these people? We just like exist in this like purgatory for an extra 6 to 12 months where we're not able to build features as fast. We're not able to get our message and name out in the market. We're not able to execute on sales because we can't hire enough people to do it. So it's like, you know, but if we can keep closing deals in this market, which we are, as soon as this thing, whatever this thing is that's happening, boy, oh boy, are we going to be in a really strong position. I'm a really big believer, the data is very clear, that companies that survive, you know, these recessions or this whatever thing, economic downturn, whatever stupid set of words people want to assign to it, in our position, if we come out of this thing the right way, and all that's pointing that we are, that should be a really advantageous position for us to operate in. So
yeah, 100%. Amen to that. With what you guys are doing in the within the whole firmware security space. So we've had a couple of projects which are very embedded security focused, like building vehicle security engineering teams for autonomous vehicles. And I then learned about firmware security, which is like a niche within a niche within another niche. There aren't many people doing it, which is positive, I guess, for you guys. But can you just tell the audience a little bit about firmware security, what exactly it is, and what you guys are doing at Netrise to combat the problem?
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the number of companies that are even claiming to do what we do in the world that have any kind of reasonable technical capability that we would even entertain as a competitor is probably like 4 to 5, maybe. Maybe. Yeah. You have a bunch of like small shops that are doing this and that, but it's like they're never going to be able to sell to like an enterprise customer. It's just not going to happen. So you're right about like the number of companies operating in this space. So before I jump into the firmware, I do want to point out something, which is we started this company with the objective of focusing on, you know, providing visibility and risk identification to devices that, and the only way to do that is by doing firmware analysis. And that's a very big like technical moat for us as we expand our platform's capabilities to address things like containers and Windows and really any artifact that one can imagine that needs to be assessed and identified from a risk perspective across the entire software supply chain. You know, I always make the comment or joke that firmware is just software with an F, which is true.
Yeah.
So, in terms of, you know, the challenges that exist with firmware, the problem is all of the problems are on the front end. Very few of those problems are like over here. Because once you get over here, this is all like normal visibility risk identification stuff. How do you correlate vulnerabilities? How do you break credentials? How do you figure out if this private key is a problem? Like blah, blah, blah. These are all problems that are relatively, you know, well understood and identified. All are solved. Over here is where you have the problems. How do you get your hands on all the firmware? How do you extract a set of artifacts or a file system from a firmware image that is something worth or even possible to analyze? How do you navigate around, you know, proprietary compression formats and encryption and a proprietary binary format you'd have never ran into? So like those are like big problems that just people look at the space and go, no.
Yeah.
Like it's so heterogeneous. You know, you have so many random devices and one-offs that coming at this thing and having a truly generalized approach to be able to solve any of those things quickly is really, really hard. Which is why we decided to do it, right? Like, I totally understand when people look at this problem space and go like, no thanks. We looked at the problem space and literally said, that's exactly what we want. we weren't interested in building like a better mousetrap for something that already exists and then go and compete with like the Palo Altos and the CrowdStrike, whoever's already out there. Like, you know, that seemed, I wasn't just not interested in doing that. I was way more interested in having a different set of problems, which is awareness that this problem exists, education of the market, you know, blah, blah, blah. Those things were, that was a much more interesting set of problems to me than the alternative.
Yeah. It's the executive order, I think it was a couple of Fridays ago, officially has been set, right? That's, I guess, benefited you guys a lot as companies are now needing to, is it attest? Is that the word to use? Software attest, is that right?
Yeah, software attestation.
Yeah, attestation.
Yeah, so that executive order is interesting. There's a lot to unpack there. I could spend an hour just talking about that. But
we've only got 20 minutes of this episode, so we'll keep it to an elevator pitch.
It was positive and not positive at the same time. They basically are delaying the software attestation requirements, which, you know, I have strong opinions about, as I'm sure you can imagine. But here's the thing: we don't need an executive order to tell us that it's a good idea to have a list of software that's running on all of the devices that are, you know, serving critical infrastructure needs. Like, we don't need the president to be like, you know what, guys, we think you should install a firewall. Like, that's insane, you know? And so it's really fascinating to me that people are putting so much emphasis on like some third party that's the reason we should do things the right way. It just makes no sense to me. And frankly, the market has already kind of adopted, you know, SBOMs. Now, in some areas, much more than others, obviously, it's still like a new solution, blah, 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 blah. But, you know, nonetheless, having support from the federal government is obviously a positive thing. And I expect, you know, kind of things to turn around, but that's kind of that.
Yeah. How are people going to be able to manage the whole supply chain thing? Because there's obviously a lot of challenges in itself around that. What do you think around that?
I mean, the first step is always getting visibility. That's the first step. It has to be the first step. You know, there's companies coming at it from a different angle. Like, okay, I understand that. I just don't think that makes sense. But this is the way I really use the analogy of EDR. If you look at early EDR solutions, they gave you more data and more visibility than anyone could do anything with, right? You need to have like a pretty high bar of a skill set to understand like what you were looking at. We're not like, it's not a perfect analogy because there's no such thing, but that's kind of where I see us at. You know, we're giving you all this data that you've never really had or seen before. And are you using it all day, every day? Of course not. However, when you have to answer a question, this is the only kind of solution that can answer it for these particular kinds of problems. Like, hey, is Log4j on my security camera or my routers or my printers or my badge card readers or my ICS and OT devices? Like, how do you know? The answer is you don't. You don't know because the device manufacturers aren't telling you because they have the same problem. So, you know, but I think here's what everybody knows that everybody refuses to admit. The reason this isn't being adopted in the way as fast as I want it to be, but fast enough for the time being, is because everybody knows what they're going to see, and it's not great.
Yeah.
You know, so, you know, it's no secret why people don't want to make their tax returns public, or like, you know, no one wants to do these things because everybody knows what you're going to find. And that is very, very true here. That's why you have this lobbying group pushing hard against SBOM in Washington, D.C. And like, listen, the great thing about what we are doing, though, we don't need your permission. We don't need you. Like, we can go get your software and your firmware. We can get our hands on it, and oh, it's encrypted. Oh, great. well, then we'll decrypt it. So, you know, there's all of these kind of people putting hurdles and obstacles in the way, which just tells me one thing, that we're doing the right thing. People don't put hurdles and obstacles in your way that are significantly bigger than you unless you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, agreed.
So we're going to keep pushing.
Nice, awesome. What's next for you guys then? So for Netrise, obviously you've hired a lot. What are the plans over the next year, 2 years, and where are you taking this bad boy?
Yeah, I mean, so we have Black Hat coming up. I mean, we
Nice.
have a bunch of, you know, new features that we'll be announcing, expansion of the platform's capabilities overall. So we'll be doing a lot more stuff with SBOMs. We'll be doing a lot more stuff with from a coverage perspective, where we'll be not just doing firmware. We're already not just doing firmware. We're doing a number of other things. So yeah, you know, it's really just about execution at this point. You know, it's very strange for me to not be in either like fundraising mode or hiring mode, or, you know, I was on the road like 4 to 5 weeks last quarter. So like the last 3 to 4 months have been like the most insane 3 to 4 months of my life, in terms of like getting the round done, closing the round, getting the money in the bank account, interviewing, hiring, onboarding, prepping for board meetings, RSA, like just, it's been madness. So for the first time in like over a year, I'm like relatively settled, and can only just focus on like doing my job. All those other things are my job too, but actually just execution on the business. So very excited about that.
Yeah, sick. What wrapping this up, what do you think might be a hurdle or a challenge or anything that might hold you back from being able to achieve what you want to?
You know, I mean, you have to kind of ignore what's going on in the broader macroeconomic perspective, because you just can't do anything about it. Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah, for sure.
So I think it's just a willingness for people to adopt a new solution, which is tough. I mean, now you can say that that's a harder thing to do when budgets are more constrained. It's just reality, right? So the challenge we have is proving and highlighting to people that the value that we will generate from our platform will supersede whatever budgetary constraints you may be dealing with. And that's obviously easier said than done, but that's what we're doing. So
Tom, absolute pleasure having you on, man. We'll definitely get a beer at Black Cat in next month. Yeah, bloody hell, it's rolling around quick. So I'll see you in Vegas, and thanks for coming on. All the best of success, man, and I'll see you soon.
All right, looking forward to it. Thanks, sir.